Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about an issue that's haunted the black community for decades, police brutality and how it disproportionately affects the black community. And we're going to go over some statistics and data to back up my claim, as well as look at the history of police brutality in the black community together. But anyway, let's get into it. So one of the main arguments people use for why police brutality is not a problem in the black community is they say, hey, more white people are killed every year by police than black people. And they say police aren't unjustly targeting black people. Look how many white people died, which, is kind of a crazy argument if you think about it. But I've made videos just like this one and people will comment the same thing. But that is a logical fallacy because that was never my argument. I never said that more black people die every year from police than white people. I said that police brutality disproportionately affects black people. So if we look at this chart of people killed by police by race, white people almost double black people. We've got black deaths at around 1,300 and white deaths at almost 2,500. But like I just said, the number that matters is proportionality. Because white people make up about 62% of the population while black people make up around 13%. So when you have around 160 million more white people in the US than black people, more of them are going to be killed by police. But like I just said, the important number is proportionality, the deaths per million. And if we look at this chart, we see that black people are at 31 and white people are at 13. What does this mean? This means that if you're a black person in the US, you are 2 to 3 times more likely than a white person to be killed in a police shooting. And if you still don't understand what I mean by proportionality, let me put it this way. Let's say I said, hey, I'll give you $10,000 if you can correctly guess who faced police brutality, and in a room I have a white person and a black person. And I'm not going to give you any other information besides their race. Me personally, I'm betting on the black person every single time because as we've seen statistically, black people are much more likely to face violence from police. But it's not just black people that are disproportionately affected by police brutality. Native Americans and Latinos are as well. And the next question we need to ask is why? Why are people of color, specifically black people, more likely to be killed by police? Some people will say, oh, it's because black people make up 13% of the population, but 50% of the crimes. But I need to make a whole 15-minute video on that horrible argument. But the answer to this why question of why are black people disproportionately affected by police is because of our skin color and because of the systems of white supremacy that have been deeply ingrained in America. And to look deeper into this argument, we're going to look at New York's stop and frisk laws and see how skin color affected who was going to be stopped. Now, what was New York's stop and frisk? Well, it began in the 1970s, and New York City basically encouraged officers to stop people they deemed suspicious, and to question them and pat them down and search for drugs and weapons and things of that nature. So for example, you could be a black dude in New York just going to work one day and you could just be stopped randomly by police. And they would just be like, oh, you look suspicious to me, so that's why I stopped you. And the reason this exists in the first place is because of a court case in 1968 called Terry v. Ohio. And in this 1968 case, a police officer detained 3 men without a warrant because he was suspicious that they were casing a local convenience store in order to rob it. And one of these 3 men that were casing the convenience store had a revolver, and so the Supreme Court ruled that this was constitutional, that you did not have to have a warrant to search people on the street or in businesses like a convenience store. Now, this policy lasted from 1970 to 2013, where it was ruled unconstitutional by the courts. Why was it ruled unconstitutional in 2013? Well, it was because they looked into police data and saw that they were unjustly stopping and frisking mostly black and Latino people. And that stop and frisk was just a cover for racial profiling. Police would be like, oh, that black dude's walking funny? He's suspicious now. Let's go stop and frisk him. And it's just like some random dude going to work. And if you were black in New York, you were 8 times more likely to be stopped by police, 11 times more likely to be frisked by police, and 12 times more likely for police to use force on you while detaining you. And Latinos fell very close behind black people. It was one of the most blatant forms of racial profiling we've ever seen. And then people will use the argument, well, the reason black people are stopped 11 times more is because, they had more drugs on them. Nope. If you look at police stops versus the seizure of illicit goods meaning guns, drugs, and other things, white and black people were almost exactly the same, but like I just said, black people were 11 times more likely to be stopped. So let's look at this data set together done by the Center for Constitutional Rights. And we can see that white and black seizures of illicit goods were both around the same at 16,000. With white people having more illegal drugs and black people having more illegal guns. But even though white and black people had almost identical rates of having illicit goods on them, black people were stopped at 11 times more the rate. That's why I said before that this was one of the easiest cases of racial profiling, because it was just so blatant that there wasn't even really an argument against it. One of the biggest factors for being stopped by the New York Police Department was if you were Black or Latino. The darker your skin was, the more likely you were going to be stopped by police. But of course, even though it was found unconstitutional over 10 years ago, it's still happening. Police are still unlawfully stopping and searching many people, particularly men of color. And it's most likely not going to stop anytime soon. This is just the reality of being Black in America. And the number one comment under my videos are that Black people are just pretending to be victims, and that we have a victim mentality. And it's just like one of the craziest, most ignorant comments I've ever read. Like, if you just look up the data, like I just searched on Google, police brutality affecting Black people. It's just there. And my videos on police brutality on TikTok have got around 1 million views, and I've got maybe 10,000 comments. And I've got tons and tons of people disagreeing with me and telling me that police brutality doesn't exist and this and this and that. But not a single source or academic paper proving their claim. I've got like what, 1,000 sources, 1,000 academic papers on police brutality alone, and you have 0, and you think you're right? Like, like, are you serious? How my brain works is, if I see substantial evidence to back up a claim, I'm probably gonna believe that claim. And y'all's brains are like, hey, I'm just gonna search the internet until I find something that confirms my bias. Okay, it could be a Twitter meme from a white supremacist page, a Facebook post, I don't care. Like, it's just crazy. But anyway, let me stop going on a tangent. I digress. But we just looked at stop and frisk in the 2000s, but let's take a step further back in history to the 1900s. Because police brutality against Black people isn't anything new. It's been around since this country was founded. But we're gonna start out with this picture. This is a very, very famous picture. A lot of you guys will see it in your textbooks at school. And in this picture, it depicts a Black boy being attacked by dogs by the Birmingham police. And that boy is a 15-year-old civil rights activist named Walter Gadsden, and he was being attacked by police dogs in 1963. It was very, very common in this area for police to attack civil rights protesters with dogs, weapons, water cannons, you name it. The police are instrumental in the foundations of white supremacy in America. Without them, white supremacy wouldn't be able to survive and thrive as much as it has. But during this time period in the 1900s, a shift changed, something called the Great Migration, which was when Black people moved from the rural South to the urban North, especially to cities like New York City, because they thought life would be better for them, they'd be able to find a job better, maybe there'd be less racism, less bigotry, less hatred, their kids would grow up in a brighter world. But a problem arose. Even though these Black people were running from the bigotry and hatred of the South, they faced it just as much in the North. And this was especially prevalent after World War II. This article says, quote, most white communities, including white police departments, were unaccustomed to the presence of African Americans and reacted to their increasing numbers with fear and hostility. Attitudes that were exacerbated by deeply ingrained racial stereotypes. Reflecting the beliefs of many whites, northern police departments acted upon the presumption that African Americans, and especially African American men, possessed an inherent tendency towards criminal behavior. One that required constant surveillance of African Americans and restrictions on their movements, aka segregation, in the interest of white safety. White people in the 40s, 50s, and 60s feared this Great Migration and feared this movement of Black people to their neighborhoods because they've had this view that Black people were all criminals. And that's one of the reasons that stop and frisk was accepted so rapidly in the North in the 1970s. Because many of them believed Black people needed to be surveilled, needed to be looked at. We gotta pat these people down and make sure they're not carrying any weapons or drugs. Many Black people ran to the North because they wanted an opportunity, they wanted a job, they wanted a better life for their family. And instead they were viewed as criminals and thugs and forced to abide by a police state. And Black people, of course, hated this. I mean, you're watching Black people being pulled out of cars and beaten senselessly with a baton because they look suspicious. And this basically universal hatred of the police and people who were terrorizing them led to bands and artists such as N.W.A. releasing songs like F the Police.
Yo, Dre, what up? I got something to say.
Fuck the police coming straight from the underground. A young nigga got it bad cause I'm brown. And not the other color, so police think they have the authority to kill a minority. Fuck that shit cause I ain't the one.
And they didn't just release this song out of nowhere. This came from decades and centuries of police brutality against Black people. These are some of the lyrics. F the police coming straight from the underground, a young N-word got it bad because I'm brown. And this was a reflection of what life was like if you were black in the US. You were brown on the street? Yeah, you're getting beaten senselessly by the police for no reason. And the next line says, they have the authority to kill a minority, because they did. They had full authority to do whatever they wanted to black people. Kill them, torture them, beat them senseless. It didn't matter. They were going to get away with it no matter what. And I believe this line is incredibly crucial, thinking every N-word is selling narcotics, because this was so true. A lot of white people in the North viewed black people migrating to their cities as just drug dealers and junkies moving there to sell product or sell narcotics. The statements they're saying in these songs, even though it's a catchy song, was just the reality of being black in America. And now we're moving on to the last part of this video, and we're going to take a step back to where it all began, where everything begins in the United States: slavery. When I say in my TikTok videos that a lot of things in America are based off of slavery and the suffering of black people, I'm not kidding or exaggerating. Don't worry. I'm going to do like an 18-part series on all these things that are based off of slavery. But I want you guys to ask yourself, how did we get a police force in the first place? You might have thought, maybe it was always here. Maybe all countries in the past had police forces. But the answer is no, we didn't. We created a police force because of something. And that thing was because of the transatlantic slave trade and because of slavery. The first police force in the United States was formed to catch runaway slaves. So when I tell y'all the police are a key element to upholding white supremacy, I wasn't lying. The earliest iteration of a police force in America is said to be the slave patrols, which were established in the early 1700s in the Carolina colonies. In 1779, Thomas Jefferson established a chair of law and police at William and Mary College. And after that, the police existed to keep the peace and justice existed to dispense punishment. Now, it's important to note that the police were not only there to stop escaped slaves from escaping, but they were also there to prevent colonists from engaging in prostitution. And this force was made up of volunteers called the Night Watchmen. So there is an argument to be made that these volunteer night watchmen were there before the slave patrol, as they began patrolling as early as 1631. But many historians agree that the first iteration of a real police force was the formation of the slave patrols. And the reason historians agree that the slave patrol was the first iteration of modern-day policing is because of what they were doing. Their one mission was to establish a system of terror and squash slave uprisings. And of course, pursue slaves and return those slaves to their owners. And the practices of the slave patrol are most similar to the modern-day practices of our police. I know when I see those red and blue lights behind me, I'm terrified. It definitely inflicts terror upon me. But anyway, I'm going to end the video here. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. And if you have any constructive criticism about my video and things I could do better, because I am new to this, I posted like 4 videos in total, please let me know down in the comments below. And especially inform me about my editing. I'm really trying to get this editing thing down, so if you see any mistakes or things you think I could do better, please let me know. And I have a massive list of upcoming topics I'd love to talk about, but if there's anything else in addition that you'd like me to talk about, let me know about that down below as well. But I'll be posting videos every week on this account, so stay tuned for those. And with that, I'll see you on the next one. Peace out, Girl Scouts.
Everyone keeps telling me how my story is supposed to go. Nah, I'm gonna do my own thing.